Welcome to Matters Financial, Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start quickly with some macro thoughts before I get to what happened in London. I lived in London more than half my life. I know Borough Market, London Bridge, these places I've walked through as a young boy, as a teenager. I've walked to work, and I'm appalled. But let's just deal with a couple of other things. Macro thoughts: Bloomberg dollar index has sunk back to levels last seen during session lows on US election day, November the 8th or 7th. Fed target rate and 10-year yields, we've seen a huge rally in 10-year yields, and what it's caused is a flattening of the yield curve, which typically implies that people think the economy is not strong, and therefore there is a growing perception that though they may raise rates in June, that they might well then be close to being done. I am still thinking my way through that theory. Home thoughts: current state of the DC cinematic universe in one pic from Gene Park. I like the photograph. I'm all for girl power, being surrounded by them at home. Rhino Charge, cars ready for Rhino Charge lineup. I went to it many years ago, and it's really a fabulous event. Went back to this video, the pale blue dot, the cosmos, a space-time odyssey. If you've got time in your day, please listen to it. It's Carl Sagan. We are like butterflies who flutter for a day and think it is forever. The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself, deep and meaningful. Captured this photo of the Milky Way. This is a spiral arm of our own galaxy. I especially love the distinct color of each individual star. Great photograph. And also, as is this one, the sun sets while lined up with 42nd Avenue a few days after the Manhattan Henge phenomenon in the Manhattan borough of New York City. Political reflections: this is our city. We'll continue to love London and everyone in it every day, especially through the hardest times. And that was retweeted by Peter Frankopan, and I couldn't agree with him more. Never seen this before. Londoners leaving London Bridge area with police instructing them to keep their hands on their heads. I know exactly where that photograph has been taken. The London terror attack: 7 people have been killed and 3 of the attackers. 12th of January 2015, you might have forgotten that was when Paris got attacked, and I wrote a piece called Europe Off Balance, and I wrote then the arrival of the asymmetric threat on the streets of Paris was deeply unsettling and will surely keep Europe off balance and presages a new normal, and I think this applies here as well. So very sad, and I'm going to come and try and touch on it a little bit more deeply momentarily. But just to go back now to the election, people don't like the cult of personality and the apparent Stalinist control. The public can now see it, and they don't like it. This was in the FT. The Prime Minister slips easily into the safety-first mode that blighted Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. A persona dubbed the Maybot in the media. What has gone wrong with the campaign? The one poll that matters is the poll on June the 8th, she says. Servation said the Conservatives were on 40% and Labour on 39%, indicating May's lead has collapsed by 11 percentage points over 2 weeks. His enemies underestimate him. Although nobody would mistake him for a great orator, he has the capability to stay calm and speak in plain English. Corbyn, the 68-year-old leftist who leads the opposition Labour Party in the UK, wasn't scheduled to appear at the BBC's televised general election debate this week. With Theresa May, the Conservative Prime Minister and the hot favourite to gain re-election, skipping the event, out of a superabundance of caution, Corbyn's aides didn't think that it would do him any good to debate the Home Secretary Amber Rudd, who was standing in for May. And the leaders of 5 small parties, the Liberal Democrats, the UK Independence Party, the Greens, the Scottish National Party and the Welsh National Party. At the last minute, however, Corbyn changed his mind, quite correctly I might add, buoyed by a series of opinion polls showing Labour gaining ground on the Conservatives. He zipped up to Senate House at the University of Cambridge, where the debate was being held. Seizing on May's absence and a reluctance to appear anywhere in public except in front of confirmed Conservative supporters, he performed well. Indeed he did. The Tories have been conducting a staged, managed, arm's-length campaign and have treated the public with contempt, he declared. And he went on June the 8th you have a choice, more cuts in services and living standards with the Conservatives, or vote Labour to transform Britain for the many, not the few. I think he's conducted an extraordinarily effective campaign. I've written him off as a Neil Kinnock type figure. Election data, so here's the rub, and indeed it is. A week before election in 2015, YouGov had 60% of 18 to 24 saying they were certain to vote. It was only 43% on election day. He's got to turn them on and turn them out. And that's the youth vote in order to really make headway here. UK public agree with Jeremy Corbyn on foreign policy terror links, and you'll notice they've been very slow to release the names of these 3 folks. But interesting report, the Manchester bombing is blowback. The latest evidence released June 3rd, a briefing by Mark Curtis and Nafiz Ahmed. Essentially, they are drawing the connection between interventions in Libya, where people who were in the UK had their control orders lifted in order to go and fight Gaddafi. Once they've fought Gaddafi, they've returned and saying that there are more than 25,000 of them who've returned, and essentially they're impossible to monitor, which I think is how one's got to read the situation at the moment. And I wrote about Gaddafi, and I called a piece Gaddafi's Body in a Freezer, What's the Message, in October 2011, and I was talking about his capture. And I was left thinking this dead Gaddafi business is one powerful message. And I said, who's in charge of the messaging? And you'll have to read that link. It's on Rich Wrap-Ups if you're interested. Sadiq Khan says the election should go ahead to defy the London attackers. Terrorists hate democracy, he said. Saudi-led alliance moves to blockade Qatar over Iran tensions. 4 Arab countries led by Saudi Arabia cut diplomatic ties with Qatar and moved to close off access to the Gulf country, escalating a crisis that started over its relationship with Iran and its support of the Muslim Brotherhood. Governments of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the UAE and Egypt said in statements they will suspend air and sea travel to and from Qatar. Saudi Arabia will shut land crossings with its neighbor, according to the official Saudi press agency, potentially depriving the emirate of imports. Saudi Arabia cited Qatar's support of terrorist groups aiming to destabilize the region, including the Muslim Brotherhood, Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, to accuse Qatar of supporting Iranian-backed terrorist groups operating in the kingdom's eastern province as well as Bahrain. Funnily enough, I was watching that Riyadh summit, and at one point President Sisi was speaking, and I happened to just follow what he was saying, and it was clear he was the signifier. He was very less than subtle in pointing the finger at Qatar. I've written a number of pieces and obviously been to Qatar a few times, punching beyond its size. I said Qatar is a big player in the region, punching far beyond its absolute size. Only 300,000 Qatari citizens. And I was talking about both hard and soft power. In a geopolitical context, Qatar played a big role in toppling Gaddafi in Libya, and its influence can be seen similarly in the move to remove President Assad in Syria. In foreign policy terms, Qatar has packed a big punch beyond merely hosting the US military at Udeid Air Base, and that's another issue that's in the background. And in August 2011, I wrote a piece about soft power at Qatar and Al Jazeera, and talking about first of all, how ubiquitous Al Jazeera was and how much punch that gave Qatar. Take a look at this photograph of Doha from the sky in the morning. Joe Nye coined the term soft power, defining it simply as the ability to get what you want through attraction rather than coercion or payments. Bannonism always thrives in the Trump White House when it can serve as a political accelerant for Trump. Quite correct, good point. Trump is and always will be a promoter. Facts and specifics are secondary to tone, style, and strength. Politico magazine. And then I like these two tweets from Moby Dick at sea. But shall this crazed old man be tamely suffered to drag a whole ship's company down to doom with him? With tornado brow and eyes of red murder and foam-glued lips, Ahab leaped after his prey. Saddam apparently ended his days listening to Mary J. Blige, eating muffins and riding on an exercise bike, a new book says. International markets, US 10-year yields drop near year-to-date lows following disappointing US jobs data. US 10-year yield below 2.15%, and it looks like there might be a big gap down to 1.85%. Indeed it might. That's Jamie at Reuters. Let's go to the currency markets. Euro dollar 112.65, dollar index 96.78, Japanese yen 110.60, Swiss franc 0.9641. The pound 128.73. The Aussie has been on a bit of a roll. Oh, okay, we're slipping off. 0.7454. India rupee 64.335. South Korean won 11.80. 0.82, the Rial 324.87, Egyptian pound 18.0025, and the Rand last 12.8487, very firm, the Rand again. Pound falls after London terror attacks raise political tensions. I can see it falling to around 126, and if we've got a hung parliament, 125. Oil rebounds after Saudi-led alliance cuts Qatar ties over Iran. I wrote in brackets, sell, sell, sell. This Doha pop is just a pop and a head fake. Samir Mamdani tweeted, you better recognize oil. And you can see from this infographic the size of the oil market in comparison to other markets and its importance and centrality. This number is a slap in the face of OPEC. US oil rigs grew by 11 this week. The rig number has more than doubled from a low of 316 in May 2016. Oil fell sharply last week, biggest weekly decline since the week ended May 5, though it's got a rebound today on that Qatar news. My crude oil target for WTI, which is at $48.21 right now, is actually $32 a barrel. It's an outlier target, but you know the reasons why I think oil can move very exponentially. And I think furthermore, it's a Wizard of Oz moment. OPEC can now jaw, but no one's listening and no one believes what they're saying. And that is a big moment in markets. You get big price adjustments, and that's what I'm expecting. Gold 1279.76. Returns soar as emerging markets turn less volatile. We've been speaking about this a bit, and you can see it in somewhere like South Africa. Emerging markets are the calmest they've been in nearly 3 years, helping to draw a surge of funds from abroad and boosting returns in a sector that many investors once viewed as notoriously turbulent. Emerging market bond funds received inflows of $1.1 billion in the week to May 24, marking the 7th consecutive week of net inflows, according to data tracker EPFR. Sub-Saharan Africa, Netanyahu. I'm flying tonight to Liberia at the invitation of ECOWAS. It's the first time a non-African leader has been invited to speak at the forum. Interesting. Congo President Joseph Kabila, big interview in Der Spiegel, very interesting. There is the suspicion that you would follow the example of the presidents of Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda or Congo and change the constitution to extend your term in office. Kabila, if you want to talk about countries that change their constitutions, let's talk about some countries in Europe. The idea that it's only Africa which has the tendency of changing constitutions is biased and not correct. To change a constitution is constitutional. Within the Constitution, there is the word referendum. You can change the Constitution by referendum, but we have not yet called for a referendum. As of today, we have not yet organized any meeting or discussions on how to change the Constitution. So there will be no third term for President Joseph Kabila. It depends what a third term is, he said. And then, let me very interesting interview, worth reading in full, which means you have to hold elections promptly, and that's why we're working 24 hours a day in order for those elections to be held. And then Mr. Katumbi has vowed to return. Is that your worst nightmare? I don't have any nightmares. Believe that God exists, and I trust in God, and I trust in the judgment of the Congolese people, but we're moving in the right direction. We hear elderly people in the streets saying, we do not want another Mobutu, a tyrant who plundered the country for 32 years. Whom are the people comparing Mobutu to? I don't think it's an appropriate question as far as I'm concerned. About the elections, it might take longer or not. As I mentioned earlier, if you organize chaotic elections, you will get chaos. Where do you see your role or position after the official end of your term in office? Well, I'll leave that to myself. Don't worry, I'm not going to commit suicide, and I will definitively continue to be of service to my country. He, of course, outwitted Katumbi in June last year by removing him from the street in the Congo entirely. But the street in the Congo remains a tinderbox, and it has become a major area of political contestation across the continent. Angola's Sonangol on the brink. Maca Angola is reliably informed that on May 17, Isabel dos Santos went to see the finance minister to request an injection of $3 billion to rescue Sonangol from bankruptcy. International financiers are said to believe that her brand is now toxic and clearly a big problem. Somalis give names to the droughts and they give names to the wars, said Karani, foreign policy. It was a massive drought that propelled Karani, who's now almost 80, into the job that defined his career. Somalia typically has 2 wet seasons each year. The long rains, the goo, last from April to June, and the dare from October to November. But in 1974 and 1975, the rains never came. The Dadabeer drought, as it became known, translates to the long-tailed one because it stayed for a long time. South African all share up 4.41% this year, dollar versus rand. Take a look at the 6-month chart. The rand has been very firm and able so far to push back on the political risk. Egypt's net international reserves are nearing levels unseen since the 2011 Arab Spring. Look at the numbers, pretty impressive. The Egyptian pound at 18, I think 18 is the equilibrium price. I wrote on the 29th of May about how a number of African markets have entered bull market territory, and even Nigeria was at the cusp. Nigeria has crossed, it rallied 3.49% on Friday, has crossed into bull market territory. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index, it's up 13.61% in 2017. I like this family picture with President Nyusi and all partners. Congrats to the NE team. This is the news around NE signing off on this huge gas project, which is going to turn the fortunes around for Mozambique. Kenya inaugurates its biggest infrastructure project since independence more than 50 years ago. My piece over the weekend, Nairobi can learn from Jakarta on food subsidies. Once upon a time, well, close to 20 years ago, which might as well mean some fairy tale past given the speed with which the world is turning and turning these days. I was a managing director at Sumitomo Bank and running a repo desk and reporting to the very anglicized Konishi-san, who was my executive chairman. Konishi-san had hired me when I was 30 and made me a managing director. I had assembled a team of 15 that sat in London, New York, and Tokyo. The repo markets in those days were a go-go market, and we were aggressive, and in fact, clients from all over the world knew we embraced taking on positions that others might blink at. Sumitomo Bank had invested in an Indonesian bank, and we did some business there with the Bakri brothers, who were quite a colourful pair and deserving of a column of their own. In that period, 1997 to 1998, East Asia was gripped by a financial crisis, which started with the collapse of the Thai baht. The Indonesian rupiah followed. One morning, Konishi-san called me into his office. The government of Indonesia is requesting a $500 million facility. Can we do it? He asked. They are requesting we visit Jakarta immediately. The next day we were in Jakarta, and in the evening we were in State House with President Suharto, his Minister of Finance, and the Governor of the Central Bank, Konishi-san, and myself. I engaged with the Governor and we established we could cobble together enough collateral, and I turned to Konishi-san and said, yes, we can. We were, of course, going to be rewarded very handsomely. And I had persuaded Konishi-san that not only would we make a lot of money, but they would never forget that we had pulled through when everyone was hitting the eject button. Konishi-san sat on the board of the bank in Tokyo and started to call other board members to get their agreement. We were front-running a request to the IMF by the government. And at that moment the phone rings and the minister picks it up, and then he turns to his president and announces, we have got the IMF package, but one of the conditions is that we remove all the food subsidies. The president then turns to all of us and says, well, that means I will be gone in a week. And he was. Such a thing is not something you forget, and from that time I've studied the correlation between food prices and political reactions, and let me tell you that high food prices are typically seriously inimical to the interests of the incumbent government. President Suharto was an extreme example. Now, what is crystal clear is that to date the response to high food prices, and we can discuss another time why we're here in the first place, could best be described as suboptimal, or more accurately, a pig's ear. And in an election year, markets are often characterized as a tug-of-war between greed and fear. Well, here it appears that greed, profiteering, has triumphed over fear, the political need to win an election. Intelligence reports have this election neck and neck, as does my proprietary rich model, every vote will count. If I were President Kenyatta, I would be dialing up President Enrique Pena Nieto and be ordering all the food supplies directly from him. I would be packaging the unga on the high seas with the right branding and stamping it with a 90 shilling price and dumping it on the local market. It's called risk management. Let me put up a photograph of President Suharto and another one of Jakarta, sunset in Jakarta, and another photograph of the opposition in Kapsabet. The Nairobi All-Share is up 12.55% this year now, and is at a 22-month closing high. The NSE 20 is up 9.01% this year. Both are in bull markets. Safaricom closed at a record. It's up 17.49% this year. Kengen is up 35.344% this year. Equity Bank rallied 3.28% to close at a 2017 high of 39.25, and it's plus 30.833% this year. You can dive into any share at the stock market by clicking on the link at the right at the bottom of Rich Wrap-Ups. And remember, It's free to look at the live feed from the stock market. Just register at rich.co.k and go to Rich Live. Once again, thank you.